Have you ever devoted years of your life to caring for someone only to be told you were never really part of the family? This is my story, and if you stay until the end, you'll understand why the most powerful inheritance isn't always money or blood. Sometimes it's being seen for who you truly are. I was never in the family photos that lined my grandfather's hallway. The frames were gold-trimmed, large, dignified. They featured Brielle, my younger half-sister, smiling beside Grandpa at hunting lodges, twirling at debutante balls, blowing out birthday candles at country clubs. Me, I was usually the one behind the camera. Quiet, careful, forgotten. My name is Clarissa Cole, and I'm 41 years old. I work part-time as a librarian in Savannah, Georgia. It's not the kind of job that draws applause at dinner tables, but it's mine. And in books, I've found a truth I never got from people. It's not bloodlines that make you belong. It's presence. I grew up with my mother and my grandfather. My father was never in the picture, and my mother met Brielle's father years later. From day one, I was the step-something. Her daughter, from a previous life, they'd say, never quite belonging, never fully acknowledged. Brielle, on the other hand, was the family's prized jewel, 8 years younger, golden-haired, bright-eyed, always the center of every toast, every speech, every plan. She was Grandpa's real granddaughter. I was Clarissa, from the library. When Grandpa's health began to decline with Parkinson's at age 87, I quietly moved back into his house to care for him. I learned his medications cooked bland meals he could keep down, gently bathed his shaking hands with warm towels. I coordinated appointments, managed bills, kept the house from falling into silence. Brielle. She was busy traveling through Europe, posting curated photos of sunsets in Barcelona, sipping wine in Provence. She sent flowers once, I think. Carnations. I never asked for anything. Not thanks, not recognition. When Grandpa's speech began to falter, I read aloud to him every night. Jane Austen Langston Hughes, even Hemingway when he was in a nostalgic mood. Sometimes he'd squeeze my hand as I read a tear falling down his cheek. The rest of the family rarely came. My mother would say Clarissa's good at that sort of thing. Let her handle it. Brielle once called during a particularly rough week and said I could never deal with all that adult diaper stuff. You're built for it, I guess. When Grandpa passed away, I arranged everything the jazz trio, the white lilies he loved, even the reading of Psalm 23. No one asked me how. No one knew the details. They just showed up in black designer outfits, dabbing tears with silk handkerchiefs, murmuring about how devastated they were. I stood off to the side in my simple dress, holding the program I had printed myself. Mom asked if I could snap a few photos for the family album. Of course she did. That night, I sat alone in Grandpa's house, flipping through an old photo album. Tucked in the back there, it was one photo of me and him from when I was maybe 7. We were standing outside the old Savannah Public Library, him in, suspenders me in pigtails, both beaming. The door creaked open. Brielle waltzed in heels, clacking on the marble floor. She didn't look at me, just tossed her designer bag on the sofa and said loud enough for the chandelier to tremble. So, how much did he leave? This place would make a gorgeous vacation rental. I didn't respond, just watched the chandelier sway in the filtered porch light. I knew what they thought, that I was the temporary caretaker, the charity case, that the real inheritance would go to Brielle, the bloodline heir. But they didn't know what I knew. Grandpa was the only person who ever called me his granddaughter without flinching. And when he said something, he meant it. The day of the will reading was unusually warm for early spring in Savannah. The azaleas in the front yard had bloomed early. Grandpa would have said that was good luck. But I knew better than to hope for things like that. We were gathered in the family law office on East Bay Street, in a room filled with old books and even older money. The air smelled of mahogany and air conditioning. I sat on the far end of the table next to an empty chair where Grandpa used to sit when he handled estate matters. It felt wrong that it was empty, but no one else seemed to notice. Brielle swept in, 10 minutes late, dressed like she'd come from a Vogue editorial, sharp beige blazer, a silk blouse in robin's egg blue and heels that clicked across the hardwood like she owned the place. She didn't look at me, just nodded at our mother, and took a seat directly across from me. The lawyer, Mr. Alden, who had known Grandpa for over 30 years, stood at the front, clearing his throat politely. Before he could begin, Brielle leaned back and said loudly enough for the entire room to hear, "I hope we can get this done quickly. I have a reservation at Husk at 2. Our mother chuckled. "Of course, darling. I'm sure this will all be just a formality. Daddy loved you so much." They all looked at me as if I were the help. Mom added with her thin-lipped smile, "And Clarissa, dear, I assume you'll stay on a few more weeks to help us tidy up the property once it transfers." There it was, not a question, a presumption. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Mr. Alden raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I should have been used to this being invisible, being useful but not valued. I'd been spoken over my whole life. But hearing my own mother assign me to the role of caretaker of a house I'd kept running for years like I was some live-in maid they could quietly phase out hit different, I just nodded. Not because I agreed, but because silence was the only armor I had left in that moment. Brielle smirked and whispered, "At least she's not making it awkward." So gracious it was meant to be heard. They all laughed. I don't remember the rest of the small talk. I just remember clutching the hem of my black dress under the table and pressing my nails into my palm hard enough to feel something. Then came the final insult. As Mr. Alden opened the leather-bound folder with Grandpa's will, Brielle reached across the table and said sweetly, "Just a quick note, Mr. Alden. I've already contacted a stager to prep the house for listing. We'll want to maximize resale value, of course." He blinked. I stared at her. She hadn't just assumed she would inherit the house, she'd already begun the process of selling it. I saw it then, the full picture. To them, I wasn't just unimportant, I was disposable. My years caring for Grandpa, the sleepless nights, the dignity I tried to preserve for him, as his body failed him they didn't even count. To them, this was about legacy, blood, appearances. And I was just a footnote in the family story. Mr. Alden gently put up a hand. "Miss Brielle, I think it's best we allow the reading to proceed before making any assumptions." Her face twitched only slightly, but she recovered fast. Of course she smiled. Legal stuff. Then she looked at me and mouthed 2 words. "Be useful." I don't know why those words were what did it. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe it was the fact that I had just buried the only man who ever truly saw me. But something inside me shifted. I looked away, not out of shame, but because I no longer needed her gaze. There are moments in life when betrayal no longer surprises you when it calcifies into clarity. That was mine. They thought this was the day they would claim their prize. They had no idea what Grandpa had left behind. After the reading, I didn't go to the post-will lunch at the country club. They went without me, of course, Brielle Mom and our 2 uncles laughing like they'd just closed a big real estate deal. Because to them, that's what it was, even though Mr. Alden had asked them to return in 3 days for the full estate execution they were already celebrating. I stayed back. I walked home. Not drove, walked. Down the old cobblestone streets of Savannah through the historic district where Spanish moss hangs like tired sighs from the oaks and memories cling to bricks like mildew. I walked past Calhoun Square, past the bakery Grandpa loved. The smell of warm bread hit me, and I had to stop. My knees buckled a little. That's where we used to go every Thursday. I'd push his wheelchair and he'd ask for the ugly sourdough because he believed imperfections meant character. I sat on the bench outside remembering the way his hand felt in mine, thin, cold, always trembling, and how he'd try to hide it even in the end. He hated feeling like a burden, so I made sure he never had to ask for anything, and now I wasn't even invited to the lunch. I went back to his house, my house, though I wasn't sure of anything anymore, and sat at the kitchen table. The same one where I had ground his medication into applesauce, where I had sorted pills, paid bills, read weather forecasts aloud because he liked hearing about storms. I sat there in silence, staring at a tea ring he'd left once. I'd never cleaned it. I didn't know why. The silence was so thick it pressed on my chest. That's when I cried. Not loud, not angry, just this slow, aching sob that came from somewhere beneath my ribs, the kind that doesn't make a sound but leaves you hollow. I cried because I felt erased. I cried because I'd given everything and was still seen as nothing. I cried because I had loved him, and they had only loved what he might leave behind. I thought about packing up and leaving Savannah altogether. There was a studio job in Atlanta I could maybe apply for. I had a former professor who once said I'd be a good archivist. I could disappear into a university library, let the world forget me, the way my family had already done. I even started searching listings. I bookmarked one for a small apartment. I stared at the screen for hours, and then something stopped me. It was nearly midnight when I wandered into Grandpa's old study, a room they'd already referred to as the game room to be during the will meeting. I ran my fingers over the spine of one of his old books. The dust was undisturbed. That's when I noticed an envelope tucked behind a shelf, yellowed, sealed, and addressed in his handwriting, for Clarissa. Only when they've all gone. My heart stopped. Hands trembling, I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. If you're reading this, it means they didn't wait. I knew they wouldn't. I trust Mr. Alden to handle things properly, but I wanted you to know that everything is in place. The papers are filed. The trust is secured. The house, the accounts, the copyrights to my memoir, all of it is yours. Not because you're my real granddaughter, but because you were the only one who saw me when I was disappearing, and because I saw you too. There was a key taped to the bottom of the letter, and for the first time in weeks, maybe years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. And I realized something then. Maybe I had never been the one on the outside looking in. Maybe I was the only one who had ever been truly inside his heart. The next morning I returned to Mr. Alden's office. He looked up when I entered, slightly surprised to see me alone. "Clarissa," he said, motioning toward the chair. "Did you get some rest?" I nodded, placing the envelope on the table. "I found this last night. It was in his study. Behind the fiction section, of course." He read the letter slowly, his eyes tightening with each line. Then he looked up at me, not with pity, but with something closer to respect. "He left that for you. I wasn't sure you'd find it in time." In time for what I asked. He reached into the side drawer of his desk and pulled out a thick manila file. Inside were papers, several stamped with the Georgia Superior Court seal. At the top of the packet, Cole Family Revocable Trust. Clarissa Cole, primary beneficiary. "He changed everything last fall," Mr. Alden said, after Brielle's last visit, said something shifted in him. He said, and I quote, "Blood may carry my name, but devotion carries my legacy." I didn't speak. I just let the words wash over me. All this time, all the quiet, unseen days, the care, the evenings reading aloud, the moments of stillness, they hadn't been forgotten. They'd been counted, valued, protected. "What happens now?" I finally asked. Mr. Alden looked at me gently. "We execute the trust. The house, his savings, even the small royalties from his early writing career, they're yours. You'll need to return in 2 days to sign. And them, I asked. They think everything is theirs." He sighed. "They'll learn otherwise at the execution meeting." I nodded. But there was no satisfaction in me, no urge for revenge, just a quiet resolution to carry forward with dignity. I spent the next day walking the rooms of the house not as a guest or a nurse, but as its owner. Each room whispered to me now. Grandpa's scent still lingered in the den, a mix of pipe tobacco and cedarwood. His favorite coffee mug still sat in the drying rack. I didn't move it. In the attic, I found old vinyl records and a box labeled "For the Library Project." It was filled with annotated letters and essays he'd written over decades. Suddenly, I saw him not just as my grandfather, but as a man with unfinished work, and he had trusted me to preserve it. I decided then what I'd do. I wouldn't sell the house. I wouldn't redecorate it into a vacation retreat the way Brielle planned. No, I would restore it as a living archive, a private reading space, a place where community members, especially the overlooked ones, could come and feel seen. I'd name it the Alden House, in honor of both Grandpa and the man who made sure his final wishes would be honored. The day before the trust execution meeting, I received a text from Brielle. "Hey, bring the key to the house tomorrow. We're thinking of moving furniture out after the meeting." "You'll help, right?" I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because tomorrow the silence would speak for me. The conference room was colder than last time. Brielle sat at the head of the table, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. She was already barking instructions into her phone when I walked in, something about movers and paint swatches. Our mother sat beside her, flipping through a real estate brochure. "Clarissa," she said without looking up, "please be a dear and bring us coffee. Mr. Alden's assistant isn't around." I just sat down. Mr. Alden entered, followed by 2 junior associates. He didn't bother with pleasantries this time. Instead, he placed a thick stack of folders in front of him, cleared his throat, and began, "We are here to execute the revocable trust of Mr. James Edward Cole, deceased. As of the date of this meeting, all assets have been confirmed and appraised." Brielle leaned forward. Yes. Can we just get to the percentages? I've got a 2 p.m., Mr. Alden continued, ignoring her tone. "Per the instructions of the trust updated, signed, and notarized on October 17th of last year, the primary beneficiary is listed as one Clarissa Cole." Silence. The kind that stretches longer than it should. Brielle blinked. "What do you mean?" Primary Mr. Alden flipped to the second page. "Clarissa Cole is the sole inheritor of the residential property at 114 Hartwood Lane, valued at $1.73 million. She is also the recipient of all financial accounts copyrights to Mr. Cole's published and unpublished work and any associated residuals. A secondary trust has been established for maintenance of the estate's library holdings, to be managed at her sole discretion." Mom looked up from her brochure, finally hearing something that registered. There must be a mistake. Brielle is his only real granddaughter. Mr. Alden didn't flinch. Mr. Cole's language was specific. He wrote, quote, "Clarissa is the only one who stayed. The only one who saw me when my words faltered. She is my legacy." Brielle's face reddened. He was old. He wasn't thinking clearly. I was abroad. I couldn't just drop everything you dropped him. I said quietly. They both looked at me then, for the first time really looked. I wasn't dressed for war. I wore the same black cardigan I always did. My shoes were scuffed, my hands ink-stained from reading Grandpa's old essays the night before, but something in me stood taller. Mr. Alden pushed forward a signed copy of the trust. "Miss Cole, if you'll initial here, we'll begin transfer of deed and accounts." I did. Slowly, deliberately, without needing to look up. Brielle stood suddenly. "You don't deserve any of this. You're not really. You're just invisible," I said, meeting her eyes. "Until today." Mr. Alden slid a second document forward. "There's also a cease and desist order regarding any attempt to sell or list the property prior to legal transfer. It was filed in advance, anticipating possible confusion." My mother sat back in her chair, pale now. "I don't understand. He never mentioned this to me." "That was the point," I said. "He knew exactly who you were, and exactly who I was." The room was frozen. No shouting, no begging, just quiet reckoning. Mr. Alden closed the folder. "That concludes the meeting." As I rose to leave, I looked back once. Brielle was still seated, stunned. Her nails dug into the edge of her chair. My mother reached for her purse, refusing to meet my gaze. And I walked out with nothing in my hands but everything I had ever earned. The house is quiet now, but not empty. In the mornings, sunlight pours through the bay windows in the study. I open them wide, letting the breeze carry in the scent of magnolia and old Savannah brick. The rooms have been cleaned, but I left his reading glasses on the side table. I kept the cane propped near the door just where he left it, not out of grief, but out of gratitude. I've begun sorting his archives letters from his time as a young journalist in New Orleans, short essays scribbled in pencil margins, unfinished drafts of the memoir he never published. I read them slowly, one by one, and sometimes I hear his voice in my head correcting me on pronunciation or pausing to explain the meaning of an old idiom. The truth is, I don't feel victorious. I feel whole. For the first time in my adult life, I am no longer chasing recognition from people who were never capable of giving it. I no longer need to explain why I stayed, or why I loved him, or why I mattered, because I know, and he knew. Legacy isn't just property or money or having your name on a deed. It's how someone made you feel when no one else did. It's the spaces you keep sacred. It's the way one person's belief in you, quiet, unwavering, can be enough to carry you through a lifetime of dismissal. I haven't spoken to Brielle since the trust meeting. She sent one text a week later. "I hope you're happy." I didn't reply. I'm not interested in revenge. That was never the point. Instead, I've turned the front parlor into a community reading room. We open every Saturday. Kids come to read, retirees gather for poetry hour, and sometimes, just sometimes, a young woman will sit quietly in the corner like I used to, hoping someone might notice she exists. And I do. Because I know what it feels like to be erased, to be present and yet unseen. But I also know what it means to be remembered by the only person who mattered. So, here's my question to you, the one watching this. Have you ever been made to feel invisible by the very people who were supposed to see you, and if so, what would it take for you to stop proving your worth to them and finally see yourself, I'm Clarissa Cole, and I'm not waiting anymore? If you've ever been pushed aside at a family dinner, forgotten in a will, or told you're not really one of us, you are not alone, I invite you to share your story in the comments below, because the people the world overlooks are often the ones carrying the deepest legacy. And if you're still waiting for your family to recognize your worth, I hope this story reminds you that the most important recognition doesn't come from them, it comes from within.